I really enjoyed each issue. I'm gonna pass it off to my kids just so they can experience it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And um, I was gonna say something else. What was it? I feel like Chris Farley, SNL.
So you were in the Beatles.
So yeah. So yeah. Fantastic. What was I gonna say? There was something else about the comic, man. Oh, darn it. So you're gonna plan is to make a trade paperback. What else? Oh, there was something I wanted to bring up. It was, speaking of comics, what were the comics that you were collecting? When did you start collecting comics, if you did?
Okay, so I was first. I had to think back because I'm doing all this nostalgic stuff, and I think the first comic book that I probably was introduced to was a Bob's Big Boy comic, and I didn't realize that until later. Because are you familiar with Bob's Big Boy?
Yes,
it was a restaurant chain.
Right?
Yeah, I think there's maybe one left in California. I don't know if there's where else they had it. They used to have them in Arizona, but it was just a
they did. Hold on.
Burger chain.
Hold on. What? They really did have it in Arizona?
Yeah, I think so. A long time ago.
No way! I didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a kid. I'm from the '80s, so I mean, I don't remember.
As far as I remember, they did. But I mean, I could be. Yeah, because they used to have they changed them when they changed over. They changed to a place called JB's, which isn't around anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think there's still one in I know there's still one in California. But it was, you'd probably recognize the mascot if you haven't heard. Like if you've seen Austin Powers, Dr. Evil takes off in that big ship. That's the Bob's Big Boy. But they used to have, you go in there and in lieu of a kids menu, they have kids menus too, but they'd have comics for kids. So that might have been my first introduction, but or like Uncle Scrooge. My dad liked all that kind of stuff. But my first introduction as far as like sort of superheroes and comics would have been like the reruns of the 60s Batman. That was on reruns, and we would watch that, in the 70s and 80s.
Adam West, right?
Yeah. So that's right. And then, of course, after that, Super Friends and stuff like that. So what I would do is, I get these coloring books, and they'd be like, I would get like a fire safety coloring book, like these public service storybooks. And instead of just coloring them in normal, I put like Batman masks and cowls and Robin capes and stuff on them. And so I started instead of just coloring them in the lines, I just take these regular people. I'm like, these people are kind of boring. It's just some family. Let's dress them up in superhero outfits. And then eventually, like I said, my dad was in the swimming pool business, and sometimes, in the summers or whatever, when I'm out of school, he'd just take me along with him or maybe he had to run to the dump or something. I remember him having to run to the dump to dump stuff off, and and then he'd take me and we'd go into 7-Eleven, and I got to pick out a comic book from the spinner rack.
Oh,
and
spinner rack.
I had collected it. I bought a few here and there, just comics or Avengers or whatever. And then I bought this one. It was Alpha Flight number 11, I think. And I bought this comic book, and it had this cliffhanger that the next issue, one of the main heroes in this comic is going to die. And I'm like, and I remember going, and spoiler alert. So I think I went to school the next day, and I showed this comic, and this kid who knew a little more about comics than me and was aware that there were comic book stores, which I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know there was such thing as a comic book store. He says, yeah, it's the leader of the whole Alpha Flight is the one who dies. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, this just came out. I just got this. The new issue's not out yet. He says, oh no, they come out earlier when you go to the comic store. And I'm like, and your record scratch would be good point right now. And I'm like, what? There's a comic store? So and that's what got me into collecting comics. I'm like, and then back then, I didn't realize that, you kill somebody off in a comic, they're just going to come back, which that character actually did. His name was Guardian, and he did stay dead for a long time, longer than most people. But you know, I thought, how they just killed off the main guy, and like, and from there, I started reading it and everything, and that's when I started actually collecting issue by issue of certain things. So that was sort of my introduction to comics.
That's cool. That's cool. So you had a sibling? I didn't. So you have a younger brother? I knew you had a brother, but I didn't know he was younger. I thought you were cool like me, like you were the younger one.
No.
Just kidding.